Airfix is a very old company. To be specific, it's been with us for over 7 decades. In that time, they've made many kits, and many have since been retooled thanks to advancements in injection moulding technology. Whereas moulds would have previously been hand-machined with chisels and sandpaper, a very rudimentary and limited method, they can now be machined by hyper-precise robots and computers, allowing for the reproduction of far more details present on the vehicles represented than with old technology, such as recessed panel lines, rivet detail, and part scaling. But is it worth getting one of these new kits? Or can you get by with something older and still get a result that looks good on your shelf? Well, to answer that, I got myself 2 kits of the same plane. The Red Arrow's Folland Gnat in 1/72nd scale. We're going to build them both, compare the construction processes, quality of the kit, and my overall thoughts on whether or not an old kit is more worth your money. So, let's get down to business. Okay, 2 Airfix kits. One from about 25 years ago, and one more recent. Let's see how they compare. So, inside the first box, we'll find quite bare bones. We just have one bag of parts, some fluff like membership, mail-ins, and the instruction booklet. And in here, with some amount of luck, we'll also find quite a quite a large decal sheet, which contains all the markings for a wide variety of Red Arrow's planes. I dare say probably all of them. Well, maybe not all of them, but quite a few of them. And if we just... Oh, I can't be wasting time. We've only got a limited amount of recording time on my camera. There we go. If we just open up this ludicrously unnecessarily large bag, we will find all of the parts for the kit, and that includes 1, 2. Very strange. A rather confusing layout. An indeterminate number of sprues, which is more just the parts, you know, just stuck straight on to some twigs, basically. And these make up the entire kit. The wings slot into the sides, as you can see from here. Just, there's some tabs to put them in. So very bare bones, quite worn out tooling, I'd say. There's a bit of flashing, and just one transparent part thrown in there. So yeah, that's the first old Gnat. I'll just move all those parts to the side. It's worth noting, this being a starter set like the modern one, it would have come probably with these exact same paints plus a brush, and probably would have also come with a tube of poly cement. If anything, it would probably have come with an even larger one, because I guess they thought you needed more back then. God, this kit's quite dusty. Anyway, the other kit which I have is a newer release of the Red Arrow's Gnat. Hold on. This new kit, it comes, of course, on the outside with 4 paints plus a tube of poly cement plus a paintbrush. And inside, we will find all the parts that we should need to complete the kit. It comes with its own instruction manual, plus a much smaller decal sheet, I will say, and only one scheme option, unlike the earlier one. And in it, we will also find the plastic bag containing the part sprues, of which there is a determinate amount of them for once, this being 2. And hold on. I I think I've forgotten to. I think airfix forgotten to put in the transparent spruce. Oh dear. As you can see, the wings are all. The wings are attached to the top of the kit. In this case, and there are a lot more parts, so it's a slightly more complex build. And something you will note, significantly more detail, recessed instead of raised. So this should be quite a different experience to build, I would imagine. The plastic they use is slightly different. This plastic, I think, is a lot thicker, and it's also blue. But other than that, that's about it. So let's get on with the video. Before we start, though, I will include a list on screen of all the materials which I used for making. But without any further ado, let's get on with it. The construction of this old kit is very rudimentary. The cockpit detail is practically non-existent, with now but 2 seats which glue onto a few spurs that help join the fuselage halves together. The kit also only comes with 1 pilot figure, which was a bit disappointing considering the Gnat does have 2 seats, and having a pilot in place would help disguise the lack of detail somewhat. The plane's wings come in 2 parts apiece, which are simply pressed together with rather tenuous alignment, and the tab slotted into holes on the side of the fuselage. Using sandpaper and sanding sticks isn't really an option with these models, as the raised panel lines are easily rubbed away when sandpaper is used. The fuselage was quite warped, and I had to correct it with quite a bit of model putty, but not before I made a gap of actually getting it out of the tube.
Oh shit, oh fuck. Oh no. It's all come out the wrong end. Oh no. Oh fuck. Oh dear. That's not good.
Overall, constructing this plane isn't the best owing to the poor fit and the warping of the parts, but there aren't many of them, and due to its age you can afford being a little slapdash with your gluing, which I did with Tamiya extra thin cement, a luxury most models in the 70s probably couldn't have afforded. But having got past that bit, I moved on to painting. First, I primed the model in Humbrol No. 1 primer to provide a base coat for the red paint. I found that red paint kinda sucks to use because it isn't very opaque, it requires many coats to look decent, tends to be a massive hair and dust magnet, and is generally just quite rubbish to use when hand painting. I'm not an airbrush user, so I can't speak for them. I painted on the No. 19 gloss red over the whole model, which proved to go down better than expected, though it did take about 5 coats. I then attached the landing gear and doors, which I had painted in No. 11 silver, then varnished over the model using a spray can of No. 35 gloss. One issue I noticed is that I glued in both sets of the separate parts for the gear doors in both closed and open position, owing to some incredibly inaccurate tooling of the actual shape of the wheel wells. This is a common problem with old kits, such as this one, which was originally tooled all the way back in 1964. They're not that accurate to the things they're depicting. Due to limitations at the time with the injection moulding technology's precision and the quality of the machining, parts can be out of scale, malformed, or even completely different shapes to the way they should be, as is the case here. But if you aren't one too concerned with the accuracy of the planes you're making, then you should be pretty alright. Moving on to the decals, they came on a very large sheet with the option to depict over 9 different planes from the Red Arrow's fleet. These decals were dogged with quite a large amount of backing film, and the colours were not perfectly aligned, but the number of options is admirable. Too admirable, I would argue, as I couldn't actually choose the scheme I was going to depict. There's just too much choice. So, I took to the internet to engage in a bit of democracy, and after 2 days of polling, the result was that XR540 won out. When it came to applying the decals, the process was pretty simple. There are only a few stencils to apply, and most of the other decals are big and sturdy. The red centre of the roundels came separately, which I thought weird considering the paint was red and there would be no need to try and brighten the red of the roundel with the white from the other decal underneath. Really, you need a plain white decal under everything to make the colours pop properly. Regardless, the decal colours once on the model were fine, and I didn't have too many issues putting them down. The underwing serial numbers were printed as one decal for some reason, meaning I had to score them in half myself. This was a weird design choice, but it didn't present too much of an issue. These text decals have lots of excess carrier film compared to newer decals, which tend to have the film follow the outline of the letters to minimise the excess. I had to cut a bit into the rear stabiliser decals as the backing film would have prevented me from aligning it properly, but thankfully that went well and those went down pretty easily. Due to the lack of recessed detail, not much decal fix was needed for this step, so the process went relatively quickly. I was able to seal the decals in with some more varnish and move on to some light weathering. Because Red Arrow's planes are generally kept in decent condition as show vehicles, I just lightly put some enamel wash in the few recessed panel lines there were, the wheel wells and the landing gear, and around the engine exhaust, before sealing that in with some gloss varnish too. And with that, my first kit was complete and I was now ready to construct its modern counterpart, originally tooled in 2012. This kit, right out of the box, is a lot more detailed. It has thick recessed panel lines all over and is constructed in a different way, with the wing slotting in over the top as one large piece instead of a separate segment slotted into the sides. There are also a lot more detailed wheel wells, a cockpit with 2 pilot figures and decals, and much more accuracy in shape and scale all over. The pilot seemed a lot larger than in the last model and were a lot more detailed than the rather sad looking flop that was included there. However, there were also some really annoying design choices in this model. The landing gear had to be installed in the weld before insertion into the model, meaning I would have to carefully paint around them when the time came. The area around them was also a separate part which fit too tightly and wouldn't go in properly whatsoever, resulting in a very annoying and large amount of pushing and puttying to get it into place. The wings also wouldn't go all the way down due to issues fitting in with other parts I had installed previously, so I had to spend about half an hour holding them down whilst putting Tamiya extra thin in the cracks to weld the part into place, before very sloppily filling in the leftover gaps with putty. Despite being newer and more polished in its tooling, I really didn't enjoy constructing this kit. It's subjective opinion, but I was genuinely disappointed in this. Just like how they didn't even include the clear parts sprue in the box, so I couldn't even complete the kit. When I asked Airfix Spare to send me the spare parts, they told me, "Oh, this kit is too old now, we don't have the parts anymore. You still produce Gnats with the same fucking tooling." I had to use a newer Gnat and then lie about its parts being missing, so they would send me spares to use on the other kit. Why is this so difficult? I can't fucking... Moving on to painting, the process was much the same. Number 1 primer, then number 19 gloss red on top. But this time I didn't have such good results. I had to be sure to get it into the recessed detail, which was expected, but the opacity issue didn't really go away as I applied more coats, so after about 5 or 6, which should have been more than enough, there were still streaks of darker shades in the paint. I think using a white prime would have helped make the top coat look a bit brighter, but nonetheless I was still somewhat aggrieved. Regardless, after some touch-ups I could spray on some gloss varnish and move on to this kit's decal scheme. Finally. The decals on this kit are of a far higher quality, with less backing film and also being a bit thicker. There was only one scheme option available this time, XR977, which is a bit of a downside, but not too badly so. A bigger downside was the difficulty getting the decals to conform to the model's geometry. On the rear stabiliser, an out-jutting part of the rudder proved a difficult piece to get the decals to settle down over, so I had to use quite a lot of decal fix to soften them up, and even then it didn't set perfectly. No problem though, it's not too conspicuous. To weather this plane, I decided to do something a bit different. As well as the standard panel line wash, I also dabbed on a very light dry brushing of a mixture of number 19 gloss red and number 61 flesh over the leading edges of the wings to act as some sun-caused paint fading, to help disguise the dark streaks and make them look a bit more intentional. After a very long wait, my spare sprue finally arrived, and I was able to paint up the cockpit and finish the model. Due to the size of the pilot figures, the piece didn't fit perfectly, which was annoying, but at this point I was just happy that the model was done. I could put this project behind me. So, how do the models compare? Well, when it comes to the tooling, the old kit's parts had some notable warping which necessitated a lot of filler, and much of the detail was raised instead of recessed, with there being a lot less of it overall and with less accuracy. The very inaccurate wheel wells are likely a product of the time the model was tooled in all the way back in 1964, and I think they definitely detract from the model's presentation. The parts did have relatively decent fit however, and whilst there isn't a lot of detail, it does make it a bit simpler to construct. The new kit, on the other hand, whilst far more detailed, I found to be rather irritating to construct. Part of it was tight and I ended up using a lot of filler that I wasn't very happy with. The need to install the landing legs before painting is also a nuisance, and this could be a turnaway to new builders who want something simple to construct, since this is marketed as starter stairs. One problem shared between the two kits was the paint. Red isn't a good colour due to its transparency and the necessity of multiple coats to get a good finish. This isn't a problem with the kits, but it is an annoyance that means the Red Arrows planes in general are less enjoyable to build and paint than other kits. Decals between both kits were fine, with the new one gaining the edge over the old one. Now, out of the two, which do I think takes the cake? Well, I think I made a bad choice using these particular kits as comparisons. Neither are really that fun to build or paint, which I fear may have negatively coloured my views of the kits in general. But trying to take as an objective of a stance as possible, it's really up to personal preference which kit is better, and also the situation you need them for. A newer toolkit will be much better with regards to detail and accuracy, but an older tooled one can sometimes offer more freedom in its simplicity. A newer, more detailed kit could be more of an ornament, even a museum piece, whereas a lower detail kit could be as good as a cheap pyrotechnics prop for blowing up on film. I would never do that to my babies though. It's really very dependent on the subject matter though. Some kits are just worse than others, and with different levels of care, molds can deteriorate at different rates to others. But anyway, my final words are this: buy an older kit for fun and an easier build, and a newer kit for more detail and technicality. But don't buy a Folland Gnats. They just kinda suck in general. But what's funny is I've actually built this kit before. I don't have it anymore, my mum threw it out, but I do have photo evidence. Damn, I've grown a lot in the last 7 years.
Funny how things change, isn't it? And funny how things stay the same too. I don't know what I'm saying anymore. Sorry for taking so long. Anyway, like and subscribe.
Hello everyone. Genuinely though, I am sorry this took so long. I had exams and I procrastinated for ages, and then I was busy out of the house so I couldn't use my computer. It's a mess. Anyway, at least the video's done now. Please expect more in the near future. See ya. Bye.